Without a compatible human to mate with, the alien girl would soon be dead. Primus, last female of the once great Kazon Empire, now found herself utterly alone in a hostile galaxy, her species' final hope resting on the virility of a lowly human slave. Ricky Thompson, abducted from Earth as a child and sold to the ruthless Kazicorp, had long ago abandoned any dreams of freedom. He existed only to serve, building towering alien cities while his human brothers and sisters toiled and died under the cold gaze of uncaring overseers. But now, in a twist of fate, the future of an entire alien race depended on his ability to perform in a corporate breeding program. With each mandated mating, Ricky and Primus grew closer, finding solace in shared trauma. As whispers of a brewing human uprising reached Ricky's ears, he began to wonder if his role in ensuring this alien girl's survival might hold the key to his species' own salvation. The fate of galaxies now rested upon the reluctant bond forming between former master and slave. Ricky lay awake, Primus's naked blue form draped across his chest, her breath soft against his skin. In the darkness of her private chambers, the weight of their shared predicament hung heavy. The Kazan's steady heartbeat pulsed against his own, a reminder of their deepening bond and the fragility of her existence. Ricky met Zolox's gaze, mind-focused. The doctor's presence felt more threatening by the day, his interest in their mating bordering on obsessive. Primus stirred, violet eyes flicking warily to the Kazon researcher. She pulled the silk sheets tighter, shielding her naked form. Ricky's heart raced. He'd been torn between duty to the human cause and his growing attachment to Primus. Could he abandon her now, knowing her survival depended on him? Ricky pressed his forehead to hers, breathing in her alien scent. "We'll find a way out of this, Primus, together." They spent the next days planning, reaching out to Sam and the Resistance. Primus used her access to map out security weak points. Ricky smuggled in contraband tech, building makeshift weapons. On the eve of their escape, Zolox burst into Primus's chambers, flanked by armed guards. "Seize them!" he snarled. "I knew you two were up to something." They fled, dodging blaster fire, stumbling over fallen bodies. The city's neon-soaked alleys swallowed them as they raced deeper into the human slums. Shouts and sirens echoed behind them. In a dingy safe house, they collapsed into each other's arms, chests heaving. Primus coughed, a trickle of blue blood staining her lips. The escape had taxed her fragile health. Ricky held her close, his heart clenching. They were fugitives now, caught between species, the future uncertain. The road ahead would be dangerous. Primus's deteriorating health, the need for black market meds, Kazacorp's hunter squads, each posed a deadly threat, but they would face it together, an unlikely union standing against the crushing weight of a heartless system. Outside, the city seethed with unrest, a single spark waiting to ignite the flames of revolution. And at its heart, an interspecies love that would change the face of the galaxy. A sharp knock startled them both. Sam's voice hissed through the door. "It's clear. Follow me." They slipped into the neon-drenched alleys of the human slums, dodging between shadows and steam vents. Primus stumbled, her breath ragged. Ricky caught her, feeling the heat of her alien skin through the thin fabric of her clothes. "Just a little further," he urged. "So this is the Kazon girl," he growled, "and her human companion." Ricky bristled at the tone. "We need your help. Medical supplies. Without them, she'll—" Marcus's organic eye narrowed. "Talk." For the next hour, Primus detailed entry points, guard rotations, communication protocols. Ricky watched in awe as she dismantled Kazacorp's defenses with surgical precision. "Not bad," Marcus admitted. He tossed a medkit to Ricky. "This buys you a week. After that, we'll need more." Ricky administered the meds, relief washing over him as color returned to Primus's cheeks. But as the days wore on, a gnawing unease grew in his gut. One night, as they lay tangled on their shared cot, Primus traced the lines of his face. "You're pulling away," she whispered. "I can feel it." "Why didn't you tell me?" he breathed. "I was afraid," Primus admitted. "Afraid you'd see me as nothing more than a breeding experiment, like Zolox did." Their lovemaking that night was desperate, urgent, Each touch carried the weight of worlds. As they moved together, Primus gasped, her body arching in unfamiliar ways. "Ricky," she panted, "something's different." Marcus's voice crackled over the comms. "We're compromised. Evacuate now!" A nearby explosion rocked the ground. Sam's voice crackled through their comms. "K's Corp drones incoming. We need to move." Primus straightened, her breath ragged. "The mating, it's more than we thought. My body's adapting to Ricky's genetic material, but it's temporary." She locked eyes with Ricky. "Without a child, a hybrid, I'll still die." The words hung heavy in the air. Ricky's mind reeled, images of an impossible future flashing before him. Marcus scowled. "You want to breed with it?" He spat the words. "That's an abomination." "It's survival," Sam countered, stepping from the shadows. "And maybe our best weapon against K's Corp." The warehouse erupted into heated debate. Accusations of betrayal clashed with desperate pleas for unity. Ricky tuned it out, focused on Primus's trembling form. Ricky cupped her face, alien warmth beneath his fingers. "We're in this together," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes." Marcus cursed, activating a holo display. Kzacorp's CEO is obsessed. They want your hybrid as a corporate asset. "Then we don't give them the chance," Marcus growled. He turned to Ricky and Primus. "You two need to mate. Now! We'll get you off-world before that thing is born." The next hours blurred into a frantic haze. Stolen moments of intimacy amidst chaos. Primus's alien biology responding to Ricky's touch in new, startling ways. All while the resistance held the line against waves of corporate forces. The air filled with the screech of stressed metal. The warehouse roof peeled back, revealing a swarm of hunter-killer drones. "Go!" Marcus roared, shoving them towards a battered freighter. Resistance fighters fell around them, buying precious seconds with their lives. Ricky half-carried Primus up the ship's ramp, laser fire sizzling past. The engines roared to life as Sam took the controls. As they broke atmosphere, Ricky held Primus close. Her body hummed with new life, their impossible future growing within her. He placed a hand on her abdomen, feeling the weight of galaxies. "I'll protect you both," he promised, "no matter what." "I'm Colonel Reed Callahan," he barked. "You better have a damn good explanation for—" His eyes widened as they fell on Primus. "What in God's name?" In a fortified bunker, Ricky recounted their harrowing escape. Callahan paced, cybernetic implants gleaming. "A human Kazon hybrid," he muttered. "It's unprecedented." "It's a weapon," Marcus growled. "One Kzacorp can't be allowed to get." Callahan's eyes hardened. "Agreed. No one outside this room learns of its existence. Is that clear?" Weeks blurred into months. Primus's belly swelled as Dr. Lockley, a wiry man with darting eyes, monitored her progress. Ricky watched helplessly as depression settled over Primus like a shroud. "What if it's not enough?" she whispered one night, violet eyes brimming. "What if I'm still dying? It's just slower?" Outside their quarters, Raven bristled with activity. Callahan's troops drilled relentlessly, ready to repel Kzacorp's inevitable assault. Ricky threw himself into the preparations, desperate for distraction. One evening, alarms blared. A Kzacorp raiding party had breached the outer perimeter. Ricky raced to the command center, heart pounding. The skirmish was brief but brutal. As the smoke cleared, tensions exploded. Human soldiers eyed the handful of Kazon refugees with open hostility. Shouts of alien scum echoed through corridors. Before Ricky could respond, Primus doubled over, gasping. "The baby," she choked out. "It's coming!" The bunker shook, dust raining from the ceiling. Callahan's voice crackled over the comm. "Kzacorp assault ships entering orbit. All hands to battle stations." And in a sterile medical bay, drenched in sweat and alien blood, Primus began to push. Primus's scream tore through the medical bay as another contraction racked her body. Ricky gripped her hand, his fingers tightening. Dr. Lockley's face was a mask of concentration as he worked. "Push," he commanded. "We're running out of time," Lockley growled. The child's bio readings are erratic. We need to... His words were drowned out by the thunderous impact of a nearby explosion. Alarms blared. The lights flickered, plunging them into momentary darkness. "Ricky," Primus gasped, her violet eyes wide with fear. "If you have to choose..." Another push. Primus's back arched, her alien physiology pulsing with strange bioluminescence. And then, cutting through the chaos of battle, a new sound filled the room. Ricky's heart swelled. He reached for his son, but the moment was shattered by the bunker's main doors blasting inward. Ricky snatched up a fallen plasma rifle, positioning himself between the attackers and his newly expanded family. The next minutes were a blur of searing energy bolts and acrid smoke. He fired, reloaded, fired again, driven by a primal need to protect. "Your son may have just cost us everything," he growled. "K's Corp threw everything they had at us. Our defensive grid is in shambles." He turned, addressing the battered troops filing into the medical bay. "I want a full damage assessment and casualty report. Now." As the soldiers dispersed, Ricky moved to Primus's side. Her skin was ashen, but her eyes shone as she gazed at their child. "For now?" Ricky's stomach clenched. Lockley's expression was grave. "I estimate we have a year, maybe less, before her body begins to reject the hybrid genes. We'll need to find a more permanent solution." "Is it true?" one of them demanded. "There's an alien half-breed?" Ricky tensed, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle. "Stand down," Callahan ordered. He turned to address the newcomers. "Yes, a human Kazon hybrid has been born, and right now it might be our only chance at survival." Murmurs rippled through the group. Ricky caught snatches of abomination and violation of nature, mixed with miracle and new hope. Callahan's voice cut through the chatter. "Like it or not, this child represents our best leverage against total extermination. We need to get the word out." He strode to a battered comm terminal, his fingers flying over the controls. "I'm patching us into what's left of the ComSat array. We're going to broadcast this to every human colony and alien outpost we can reach." Ricky looked down at Primus and Ilario, their alien features bathed in the harsh light of the medical bay. His son's eyes, still unfocused, blinked up at him, one a startling human green, the other the deep violet of his mother's species. He nodded to Primus, who shifted Ilario in her arms. The infant blinked, his mismatched eyes catching the harsh light of the medical bay. "This is Ilario," Primus said, her voice trembling slightly. "The first human Kazon hybrid, living proof that our species can not only coexist but create new life together." On the gleaming spires of Khazaria Prime, CEO Malthus's holographic visage loomed over the assembled corporate elite. His voice boomed through the grand hall, condemning Ilario as an abomination and a threat to the natural order. But not all were swayed by Malthus's rhetoric. Grand Admiral Vorax stood at the fringes of the crowd, his cybernetic implants pulsing with barely suppressed energy. As the CEO's tirade reached a fever pitch, Vorax slipped away, making his way to a secure communication node. "Patch me through to Colonel Callahan on Raven," he growled. "Now!" Back on the battered colony world, Callahan's brow furrowed as he listened to Vorax's proposal. A ceasefire? Emissaries? It reeked of a trap. "And why should we trust you?" Callahan demanded. Callahan's cybernetic eye whirred as he weighed the options. Finally, he nodded. "We'll send representatives, but I warn you, Admiral, any double-cross and what's left of our fleet will rain fire on Khazaria Prime itself." "Still think this was a good idea?" Marcus muttered as their ship rocked from a grazing hit. Primus didn't answer. Her thoughts were with Ricky and Ilario, left behind on Raven. She prayed to whatever cosmic forces might be listening that she would see them again. On Raven, Ricky paced the confined space of their quarters, Ilario cradled against his chest. The infant's skin seemed to pulse with bioluminescence, a constant reminder of his unique heritage. A pounding on the door startled them both. "Hawthorne, open up!" "The abomination has to go," Hawkins shouted, "for the purity of the human race." "It's okay," Ricky whispered, though his voice shook. I've got you. "We accept," Ricky said, his voice steady despite the tumult in his heart. For Ilario, for all of us. As the words left his lips, Ricky felt the ground shift beneath his feet. The future stretched before them, uncharted and fraught with peril, but for the first time in years, there was a glimmer of something new on the horizon. Ricky watched from the window of the newly designated Integration Center as corporate troops patrolled the streets. The sight of their alien forms mingling with human colonists was surreal, a physical manifestation of the tenuous peace they'd brokered. Primus tensed. "You promised no more tests?" "Terrorist attack in Sector 7. Callahan's voice crackled over the comm. "All security personnel report." His words were cut off by another blast, closer this time. Ricky scooped up Ilario, his heart pounding. "We need to move, now." "This way," Lockley shouted, gesturing towards a reinforced bunker. "It's where we keep the sensitive equipment. Should be safe enough." A figure materialized out of the shadows, moving with inhuman grace. Ricky caught a glimpse of sleek black armor, a face hidden behind an opaque visor. The assassin's weapon hummed to life, targeting Ilario with deadly precision. Time seemed to slow. Ricky twisted, shielding his son with his body. Primus let out an alien shriek, her bioluminescence flaring. And then, a blur of motion. The assassin stumbled, a throwing knife protruding from a chink in their armor. Orcs emerged from the smoke, his cybernetic enhancements glowing fiercely. They sprinted for the bunker, the sounds of battle fading behind them. Inside, Lockley's equipment hummed with barely contained energy. "We don't have a choice," the doctor said, his eyes wild. "If we don't act now, we might lose our only chance." Ricky looked at Primus, saw the fear and dedication mirrored in her alien eyes. They both knew the risks, the ethical quagmire they were wading into. But with Silax's assassins closing in, with fanatics on both sides threatening to tear apart everything they'd fought for. "Do it," Ricky said, his voice hoarse. Outside, Raven burned. Inside, a child became something more, a bridge between two species and perhaps their last, best hope for survival. The bunker shook as another explosion rocked Raven's surface. Ilario's cries intensified, his small body convulsing as Lockley's equipment hummed and pulsed around him. "Minutes, if we're lucky," Callahan replied. "I'm rallying what's left of our militia, but—" "We need more time," Lockley insisted, his fingers flying over the controls. "The process isn't complete. If we stop now—" A deafening explosion rocked the bunker. The reinforced door buckled, glowing red-hot as something on the other side attempted to burn through. "Whatever happens," Ricky said, his voice tight, "we protect our son." The door exploded inward in a shower of molten metal. Through the smoke and debris, a figure in sleek black armor strode forward. Mara Silax, CEO Malthus's top assassin. "The abomination dies today," Silax hissed, raising her weapon. Ricky fired, his shots deflecting off her advanced armor. Primus lunged, her inhuman strength catching the assassin off guard. As they grappled, more figures poured through the breach. Hawkins, his face twisted with hate, led a group of human purists. Behind them, alien radicals swarmed in, their goal the destruction of the hybrid facility. Lockley worked frantically at his equipment, shielding Ilario's rapidly changing form with his own body. "Almost there," he muttered. "Just a few more seconds." A stray shot struck the doctor in the shoulder. He stumbled, his hand smearing blood across the control panel. In that moment, the equipment surrounding Ilario went dark. The hybrid's eyes snapped open. One human green, one Kazan violet. He sat up, no longer a newborn, but a young man, his features a perfect blend of both species. The fighting stopped as all eyes turned to the transformed Ilario. He stood unsteady at first, then with growing confidence. "Enough," Ilario said, his voice resonating with an authority beyond his years. Energy crackled around him, a manifestation of his newly awakened hybrid abilities. Ilario raised a hand. The assassin's weapon crumpled as if crushed by an invisible force. "I am what I am," Ilario replied calmly. "The future you fear and the hope others dream of, and I will not be erased." Outside, the sounds of battle intensified. Vorix's loyalists clashed with corporate diehards. Human militias fought alongside alien moderates against extremists from both sides. Raven burned, and with it, the old order. In the eye of the storm stood Ilario, flanked by his parents, a family bridging two worlds, their very existence a revolution. Generations to come, Ilario continued, his mismatched eyes scanning the room. We can choose to embrace our differences, or we can let fear and hatred tear us apart. A distant explosion shattered the moment. Vorex's voice crackled over the comm system. We've neutralized the main assault force, but there are still pockets of resistance. Everyone report to your designated safe zones immediately. This isn't over, Hawkins snarled, backing towards the shattered doorway. You're an abomination, and nature always corrects its mistakes. Later, Ricky cut him off. We need to get to the command center. Ilario stood before a hastily assembled audience in the colony's main plaza. Humans and aliens alike packed the square, their faces a mix of curiosity, hope, and barely concealed hostility. Hovering camera drones broadcast the event across multiple star systems. I am neither human nor Kazan, Ilario began, his voice steady despite the weight of expectation. I am both, and I am something new. My very existence proves that our species are not as incompatible as some would have us believe. We have a chance to build something extraordinary, Ilario continued. A future where our strengths are combined, where we learn from each other instead of fearing our differences. A commotion at the edge of the crowd caught Ricky's attention. He tensed, hand moving to his weapon, but it was only a group of children, human and Kazan, pushing their way to the front for a better view. As Ilario's speech concluded, the plaza erupted into a cacophony of cheers and jeers. Vorex's security teams moved swiftly to separate potential troublemakers from the rest of the crowd. A holographic display flickered to life, showing the movements of massive corporate warships. They were converging on Raven from multiple vectors, their intent clear. Vorex's cybernetic eye whirred as he processed the data. A weapon, he said softly. Something designed to target specific genetic markers. Ilario stepped forward, his mismatched eyes blazing with perseverance. I have an idea, he said, but it's going to be dangerous. Outside, the first corporate assault ships breached Raven's atmosphere. The colony's defenses sprang to life, filling the sky with plasma fire. The final battle for the future of human-alien relations had begun. For a heart-stopping moment, silence filled the cramped cockpit. Then, with a crackle of static, clearance codes flashed across the main display. We're in, Ricky breathed, guiding their ship towards the docking bay. As they disembarked, alarms blared throughout the station. Intruder alert! Unidentified genetic anomaly detected in Sector 7. They sprinted through sterile corridors, the infiltration team fanning out to secure their route. Ilario moved with inhuman grace, his hybrid physiology allowing him to outpace even the most seasoned operatives. A security squad rounded the corner, plasma rifles raised. Halt! The lead officer shouted, his eyes widening at the sight of Ilario. What in the seven hells? Ilario raised a hand, energy crackling around his fingers. The squad's weapons crumpled, useless hunks of metal clattering to the deck. We don't have time for this, Ilario said, his voice resonating with impossibly strong power. They pressed on, fighting their way through increasingly hostile resistance. Ricky noticed the growing look of revulsion on the faces of the corporate crew they encountered. To them, Ilario wasn't just an enemy, he was an abomination. Finally, they reached the bioweapons lab. Dr. Emerson, their inside contact, greeted them with wide eyes. You made it, she whispered. But we have a problem. Malthus's reinforcements arrived early. They're everywhere. As if on cue, the lab's blast doors slammed shut. Security feeds showed corporate troops converging on their position. We're trapped, Ricky realized, his mind racing. Ilario, can you interface with their systems? Buy us some time. Ilario nodded, placing his hand on a nearby console, his eyes unfocused as he made contact with the alien network. It's strange, he murmured, like nothing I've ever... A violent shudder racked his body. Ilario stumbled back, blood trickling from his nose. As the data streamed out, their extraction ship exploded in a brilliant fireball. The shockwave rocked the lab, shattering equipment and scattering delicate instruments. "We're cut off," Ricky said, the gravity of their situation sinking in. "No way out." Ilario's eyes blazed with perseverance. "There's always a way, Father. We just have to make one." Back on Raven, Primus coordinated the frantic evacuations. Shuttles filled with terrified colonists, human and alien alike, streaked into the sky, dodging corporate ordnance. "We can't hold them much longer." Colonel Callahan's voice crackled over the comms. "Where's that countermeasure?" In his makeshift lab, Dr. Lockley worked feverishly, analyzing the fragmentary data from Ricky's team. "It's not enough," he muttered, hands flying over holographic displays. "I need more time." A deafening explosion rocked the colony. Primus watched in horror as a corporate dreadnought broke through the defensive line, its weapons powering up for a killing blow. "Lockley!" she shouted into her comm. "We're out of time!" On the corporate flagship, alarms blared as Malthus's bioweapon prepared for deployment. Ricky and Ilario fought their way through waves of security forces, inching closer to the command deck. Ilario's eyes narrowed. "Yes, we will." He stepped out, energy crackling around him like a storm. Corporate troops were thrown back, their weapons disintegrating in their hands. They burst onto the command deck, Ilario's power radiating in waves. Malthus himself stood at the main console, his face twisted in a sneer. "You're too late," the corporate leader snarled. "The virus is already deploying. Your abomination of a son can't stop what's coming." Ilario strode forward, his mismatched eyes locked on the ship's neural interface. "Watch me," he growled. As Ilario's consciousness merged with the alien network, Ricky found himself surrounded by Malthus's elite guard, their weapons trained on him, fingers tightening on triggers. Ilario's body convulsed as he fought for control of the ship's systems. Behind him, Ricky faced certain death. The fate of two species hung in the balance, and time was running out. "Your choice, abomination," Malthus sneered, his finger hovering over the virus deployment trigger. "Save trillions, or save your pet human?" Ilario's physical form crumpled to the deck, lifeless as a puppet with cut strings. Ricky rushed to his son's side, cradling Ilario's head as he frantically checked for signs of life. "We need to go now," Dr. Emerson shouted, already keying in extraction codes on her wrist computer. "The ship's tearing itself apart." They reached the emergency shuttle bay just as the first explosions rocked the ship's superstructure. Ricky strapped Ilario into a med pod as Dr. Emerson punched in launch codes. "Hold on!" she yelled as the shuttle blasted free of the dying Leviathan. On Raven, Primus paced the command center, her bioluminescence flickering with anxiety. The defensive grid was failing, corporate forces pressing in from all sides. Then, miraculously, the enemy dreadnoughts began to falter and fall back. Primus's heart leapt. "Bring them in," she ordered, rushing to the landing bay. "We've got multiple breaches in the northern quadrant," the security chief reported. "A group of human extremists led by Hawkins has seized the hybrid birthing facility. They're taking hostages and broadcasting demands." Primus and Ricky exchanged a look of horror. Their victory over Malthus's bioweapon suddenly felt hollow in the face of this new threat. The battle for Raven's future was a long way to go. "I have to go," he said, his voice low and strained. "Someone needs to deal with Hawkins and his extremists before this situation spirals even further out of control." Ricky placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling the tension in her alien musculature. "If we don't stop this now, there won't be a future for Ilario to wake up to. I'm sorry, but this is something I have to do alone." Without waiting for a response, he turned and strode towards the armory. Minutes later, disguised in nondescript civilian clothes with a concealed sidearm, Ricky slipped out of the command center and into the chaotic streets of Raven. A makeshift barricade surrounded the building, manned by hard-faced humans clutching a motley assortment of weapons. Ricky affected a nervous, twitchy demeanor as he approached. Hey, he called out, raising his hands. "I heard Hawkins was making a stand against the alien freaks. I want in." Ricky's mind raced. "Because I lost everything to the Corps and their alien lapdogs," he snarled, letting real bitterness seep into his voice. My family, my home, all gone because I wouldn't bow down to their new order. Hawkins is the only one talking sense anymore. The guard's eyes narrowed, but after a tense moment, he jerked his head towards the facility's entrance. Get in there, but we're watching you. Sir, Ricky's escort announced, new volunteer says he wants to join the cause. Hawkins looked up, his gaze piercing as he studied Ricky. Is that so? And what exactly do you think our cause is, recruit? Ricky swallowed hard, choosing his words carefully. Preserving humanity, stopping the pollution of our bloodlines by alien influence. A cold smile spread across Hawkins's face. Good answer, but words are cheap. We'll see if you have the stomach for what needs to be done. He gestured to a nearby console. Monitor the perimeter. Report any movement from Orcs' hybrid lovers. For hours, Ricky played his role, all while observing the extremist operations and gauging the loyalties of individual members. He noted the weariness in some eyes, the doubt that flickered across faces when Hawkins spouted his most vitriolic rhetoric. Malthus is bombing our own people, one of the extremists cried out. Ricky saw his opening. He stood addressing the room. Or maybe this is what happens when we let ourselves be divided. Look at what's happening out there. Humans and aliens alike being slaughtered while we fight among ourselves. Is it? Ricky countered, his voice rising. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like our purity is getting us killed. Meanwhile, the hybrids, the ones you call abominations, they're out there fighting to save all of us. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Hawkins's inner circle bristled, hands tightening on weapons. But others nodded, doubt plain on their faces. The skyline of Raven burned orange with distant fires, a stark reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. Ricky steeled himself for the battles to come, knowing that the fate of two species still hung in the balance. A chill ran down Ricky's spine. The outpost? Why? Whispers of unsanctioned integration. Malthus won't tolerate any further contamination, as he puts it. They reached a makeshift command center where holographic displays showed the devastation across Raven. Primus stood hunched over a tactical map, her bioluminescence pulsing with stress. Ricky, she said, her voice tight, Alario's stable, but... She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Before Ricky could respond, alarms blared. A junior officer's voice crackled over the comms. Sir, we've got multiple explosions at the resource depots. Dissident cells are making their move. Vorux cursed, mandibles flaring. They're trying to starve us out, push us into anarchy. Ricky listened intently as Vorux outlined his plan. A covert mission to Hesper 9, leveraging Ricky's human contacts to assemble a strike team. Their goal, liberate the resource-rich world and unite its factions against the oppressive corporate regime. Ricky's eyes narrowed. And our symbol? Our rallying cry? Vorux's mandibles twitched in what passed for a smile. Alario, the living proof of what human hybrid cooperation can achieve. For a moment, Ricky hesitated. The thought of leaving his son, still locked in that mysterious coma, tore at him. But he knew that securing a future for Alario, for all hybrids, meant taking this risk. I'm in, Ricky said, his voice resolute. When do we start? Vorux's compound eyes gleamed. Now! We don't have a moment to lose. As they moved to brief Primus on the plan, Ricky cast one last look at the screens showing Raven's battered skyline. The colony still smoldered, but beneath the ashes, he saw the first sparks of a revolution about to ignite. We've got movement, Vorux announced, his compound eyes fixed on a holographic map. Malthus is redirecting his fleet towards Hesper 9. Primus's bioluminescence flickered with alarm. The mining colony? Why? Rumors of unsanctioned integration, Ricky explained, his voice tight. He's after any hint of human hybrid families. The implications hung heavy in the air. Hesper 9's vast mineral resources made it a critical asset, but its potential as an ally against corporate oppression was even more valuable. Vorux's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. We need to act fast. Ricky, I have a proposition. Use Alario as a symbol? Ricky's gaze darted to the medical bay where his son lay comatose. He's still unstable. Precisely why it could work, Vorux pressed. A living example of human hybrid potential. We assemble a strike team, infiltrate Hesper 9, and unite its factions against Malthus. Before Ricky could respond, alarms blared. A junior officer's voice crackled over the comms. Multiple explosions at the resource depots. Corporate dissidents are sabotaging our rebuilding efforts. Vorux cursed, mandibles flaring. We're running out of time. Ricky, what's your decision? Ricky's mind raced, weighing the risks against the potential payoff. He looked to Primus, seeing the tenacity etched in her alien features. With a sharp nod, Ricky turned to Vorux. I'm in. Who do we have for this strike team? The security chief's compound eyes gleamed. I've got a few candidates in mind. First up, Talek, ex-corporate mercenary with a grudge against Malthus, and an alien bounty hunter named Mykala, who's been making waves in the outer colonies. As Vorux pulled up their dossiers, another alert pinged. The security chief's mandibles twitched with concern as he scanned the incoming data. Malthus has deployed an asset to Hesper 9, he reported grimly. Codename, Diney. Our intel suggests she's a highly modified assassin, equally lethal to humans and aliens. Ricky's teeth clenched. Then we need to move fast. How soon can we mobilize? I've already requisitioned a corporate cargo hauler, Vorux replied. We can be en route within the hour. As they finalized preparations, Dr. Lockley burst into the command center, her face flushed with excitement and worry. Alario's neural patterns are stabilizing, she announced breathlessly. I think I can wake him. Ricky exchanged a look with Primus, hope warring with fear. Do it, he said finally. We'll need every advantage we can get. While Lockley returned to the medical bay, Ricky and Vorux assembled their ragtag crew. Talek, a grizzled human with cybernetic enhancements glinting beneath his scars, eyed the alien bounty hunter Mykala warily. The lithe, reptilian figure returned his gaze impassively, her scaled hand resting on the hilt of an exotic energy weapon. Listen up, Ricky addressed the group. We're heading into a powder keg. Hesper 9 is on the brink, and we need to light the fuse of rebellion before Malthus can snuff it out. Our mission is to unite the colony's factions against corporate control. Talek snorted. And how exactly do we pull that off? Before Ricky could answer, alarms blared once more. Dr. Lockley's voice crackled over the comms, urgent and strained. Ricky, Primus, you need to get down here, now! They rushed to the medical bay, finding Alario's bed surrounded by a shimmering energy field. The young hybrid's eyes were open, glowing with an otherworldly light. His abilities, Lockley breathed, they're evolving rapidly. Ricky approached the field cautiously. Alario, son, can you hear me? The boy's head turned, his gaze focusing on his father with unnerving intensity. When he spoke, his voice echoed with harmonics that sent chills down Ricky's spine. I see it, Dad, Alario whispered. The path forward, the connections. We have to go to Hesper 9. Now. As if in response to his words, the ship's engines roared to life. Vorux's voice came over the intercom. We've got incoming signals from Hesper 9, multiple distress calls. Daney's already making her move. Ricky looked from his son to Primus, then to the assembled strike team waiting in the corridor. The weight of their mission pressed down on him, but he pushed aside his doubts. With a nod to Dr. Lockley, he helped Alario to his feet. All right, people, he called out. Let's move out. We've got a colony to save and a revolution to ignite. As they boarded the disguised cargo hauler, Ricky couldn't shake the feeling that they were hurtling towards a confrontation that would reshape the future of humanity and alien kind alike. With Alario's newly awakened powers as their beacon, they set course for Hesper 9 in the deadly gauntlet that awaited them there. The cargo hauler shuddered as it entered Hesper 9's atmosphere, its hull groaning under the strain of re-entry. Ricky gripped his harness, stealing a glance at Alario. The boy's eyes flickered with an otherworldly light, his face a mask of concentration. We're picking up multiple distress signals, Vorux announced from the cockpit. It's worse than we thought. There, Mykala hissed, her scaled finger pointing to a secluded ravine. We can set down undetected. The ship touched down with a bone-jarring thud. As the team disembarked, the acrid stench of burning plastics and worse assaulted their senses. Talek's cybernetic eye whirred as it scanned the horizon. They made their way through the rugged terrain, skirting the edge of a civilian outpost. The closer they got, the more apparent the carnage became. Bodies littered the ground, human and alien alike, their differences erased in death. A woman's scream pierced the air, followed by the distinctive whine of energy weapons. The team crouched low, edging towards the sound. What they saw made Ricky's blood run cold. A group of humans, eyes wild with fanaticism, had cornered several aliens against a crumbling wall. Their leader, a scarred man with a shock of white hair, raised his weapon. Before Ricky could react, Ilario broke free from his grasp. The boy stood, arms outstretched, as a visible wave of energy pulsed from his body. The fanatics froze in place, weapons clattering to the ground. "Stop!" Ilario commanded, his voice echoing with power. "This isn't the way." The scarred leader turned, his face contorting in rage and fear. "Abomination!" he spat. "Daini will cleanse this world of your kind." Maikala's energy weapon hummed to life. "I've heard enough," she snarled. Vorax's mandibles clicked rapidly. "We're out of time. Look." On the horizon, a sleek corporate dropship descended through the clouds. More would surely follow. "Malthus," Ricky breathed. He turned to the team, his fist tight. "We need to move, now. Find me someone in charge of this outpost who hasn't gone completely insane." "I think we just found our welcoming committee," he growled. Ricky hefted his weapon, glancing at Ilario's semi-conscious form in Primus's arms. They were running out of options and time. The real fight for Hesper 9 was about to begin. The ground trembled as another explosion rocked the settlement. Ricky's team pressed forward, weaving through panicked crowds and debris-strewn streets. Ilario stirred in Primus's arms, his eyes fluttering open. "We need to move faster," Vorax urged, mandibles clicking anxiously. "Malthus's forces are closing in." As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a mob of humans and aliens, huddled behind makeshift barricades. Fear and suspicion etched their faces as they caught sight of Ilario. "The abomination?" she hissed, her voice a synthetic rasp. "Malthus sends his regards." In a blur of motion, Daini unleashed a barrage of bioweapon projectiles. Maikala reacted instantly, shoving Ricky aside as a glob of corrosive material sizzled past. "Scatter!" Talek roared, his cybernetic eye whirring as he returned fire. Ilario's eyes snapped open, blazing with otherworldly light. "No!" he cried, his voice laden with harmonics that shook the very air. "Ilario, stop!" Ricky pleaded, reaching for his son. But it was too late. The psionic shockwave exploded outward, a visible distortion in reality that shattered windows and buckled metal. Ricky was thrown off his feet, his ears ringing as he struggled to regain his senses. "The hybrid!" someone shouted. "It's destroying everything!" Ricky turned to see Primus cradling Ilario, the boy's body racked with tremors as energy crackled around him. Before he could reach them, a deafening roar filled the sky. Malthus's ships had arrived. Massive dreadnoughts blotted out the sun, their weapons primed and glowing with ominous energy. A holographic projection flickered to life above the ruined settlement, Malthus's cold eyes staring down at them. "Daini," the CEO's voice boomed, "cleanse this world, leave no survivors." As if in response, Daini burst from the rubble, her body now a nightmarish fusion of flesh and bioweapon. She locked eyes with Ricky, a cruel smile twisting her features. The first biogenic missiles streaked from the ships above, green contrails marking their descent. Ricky grabbed Ilario from Primus's arms, his mind racing. "We need to fall back," he shouted to what remained of his team. "Find cover!" As they retreated through the collapsing infrastructure of Hesper 9, Ricky couldn't shake the sickening realization that their mission had backfired spectacularly. The revolution they'd hoped to ignite had instead become an apocalypse. And somewhere in the chaos, his son's powers continued to spiral out of control, threatening to tear apart the very fabric of the colony they'd come to save. "Over here!" Vorax's voice cut through the chaos. The Kazan waved frantically from a half-collapsed building, ushering the ragtag group inside. They stumbled into the makeshift shelter, coughing on dust and acrid smoke. Maikala slumped against a wall, her scales singed and bleeding. Talik's cybernetic eyes sparked erratically as he scanned for threats. "What have we done?" Primus whispered, her bioluminescence dim with shock. "It's Vorix's people," he said, hope flickering in his chest. "They've received our distress call. A Kazan strike force is inbound." Talik snorted. "Fat lot of good that'll do us now. Look." "No more running," she snarled, milky eyes fixed on Ilario. "Move your asses," a female voice boomed. "Extraction window closing fast." Ricky's team sprinted for the waiting transport, Diani's furious howls echoing behind them. As they boarded, Ricky locked eyes with the Kazan commander, Vyra, her face a mask of unbreakable spirit. "We've mobilized every civilian transport we could find," she said, gesturing to a ragtag convoy assembling nearby. "But we're running out of time." The transport lurched as they took off, narrowly avoiding a glob of corrosive material that ate through the hull plating. Ricky looked down to see Diani pursuing, her body now a nightmarish fusion of flesh and weaponry. "Ilario," Primus said urgently, kneeling beside their son, "you need to focus. Your powers are tearing you apart." Ricky knelt beside them, pushing aside his own anguish. "Breathe with me, son," he said, taking Ilario's hand. "Just like we practiced." As Ilario struggled to regain control, Diani's forces closed in. Vyra barked orders to her commandos, rallying a defensive perimeter around the civilian transports. The air filled with weapons fire and the screams of the dying. In that moment of connection, something clicked into place. Ilario's breathing steadied, his powers coalescing into a shimmering energy shield that enveloped the entire convoy. "Impossible," Vyra breathed, watching as Diani's bioweapons splashed harmlessly against the barrier. Ilario's shield flickered, straining under the assault. Sweat beaded on the boy's forehead as he pushed his nascent abilities to their limit. "We can't hold this," Ricky growled. "Vyra, we need to go now." The Kazan commander nodded, signaling her pilots. As one, the ragtag fleet of transports began to rise, still cocooned in Ilario's protective field. Through the shimmering barrier, Ricky watched as Hesper 9 vanished beneath a tide of sickly green flame. The dreadnoughts above unleashed their full fury, determined to scour the colony from existence. As they broke atmosphere, Ilario's shield finally collapsed. The boy slumped in his parents' arms, utterly spent. Ricky held him close, his gaze fixed on the burning world below. They had escaped, but at what cost? And what new horrors awaited them in the vastness of space? The Kazan fleet emerged from hyperspace, battered but intact. Ricky exhaled, allowing himself a moment of relief as he surveyed the ragtag convoy of civilian transports. They had escaped, but the cost was etched in the haunted eyes of the survivors. "Power surge detected," Vyra shouted from the command console. "It's coming from—" "Primus," Ricky called out desperately. "He's losing control again." The Luxari scientist rushed to their side, her bioluminescence pulsing with worry. She placed her hands on Ilario's temples, channeling her own energy in an attempt to stabilize the boy's surging abilities. "His neural pathways are in chaos," Primus reported, her voice strained. "The trauma of what happened on Hesper 9, it's overwhelming him." Another tremor rocked the ship. Through the viewport, Ricky watched in horror as one of the civilian transports began to break apart, torn asunder by invisible forces. "We need to get him to the medical bay," a gravelly voice cut in. Dr. Lockley, her lab coat singed and torn, pushed through the crowd of panicked refugees. "If we can't contain his powers, he'll tear this entire fleet apart." Ricky's blood ran cold. They were in no shape for another fight. "How long until they're in weapons range?" he asked. 10 minutes, maybe less," Talik replied. "And these aren't standard corporate gunships. They're different. Heavier armor, bioweapon payload. Ricky, I think this is an extermination fleet." In the medbay, Dr. Lockley worked feverishly, attaching sensor pads to Ilario's thrashing form. Primus never broke contact, her own life force visibly dimming as she struggled to contain the boy's psionic maelstrom. "His hybrid physiology is unlike anything I've ever seen," Lockley muttered, eyes fixed on cascading data streams. The raw power he's generating, it's off the charts. We're out of time, he growled. Doc, what are our options? Lockley's face was grim. We need to stabilize him, fast. But the only way to do that might be... All hands, brace for impact. Enemy vessels launching bioweapons. The medbay erupted into chaos. As the first impacts rocked the hull, Ricky made a decision that would haunt him for years to come. Let this work, he thought. Let it be enough. The hypospray hissed. Alario's eyes snapped open, blazing with otherworldly power. And then, for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the universe held its breath. Breath. The hypospray's effects rippled through Alario's body. His eyes rolled back, limbs going rigid as the cocktail of stabilizers battled against his hybrid physiology. For a heart-stopping moment, silence reigned in the chaotic medbay. It's working, Dr. Lockley breathed, her fingers flying over a diagnostic panel. Neural patterns stabilizing. Ricky sagged with relief, but the respite was short-lived. The ship shuddered violently, throwing them off balance. Direct hit to our port nacelle. Vira's voice crackled over the intercom. We're losing altitude fast. Ricky scooped up Alario, the boy's skin still burning with residual energy. We need to evacuate, now! They stumbled through smoke-filled corridors, alarms blaring as the Kazon vessel plummeted towards an unfamiliar planet below. Ricky's mind raced, searching for options. There, Talek shouted, pointing to a row of escape pods. Last chance. As they piled in, Ricky caught a glimpse of Vira sprinting towards them, her face set in unwavering tenacity. She slammed the launch controls, sending their pod hurtling into the void mere seconds before the ship disintegrated in a ball of sickly green flame. Dazed and battered, they emerged from the crumpled pod. Ricky did a quick head count, himself, Alario, Primus, Talek, and Vira. They had survived, but to what end? Where are we? Primus asked, her bioluminescence flickering weakly. Vira consulted a battered datapad. If I'm reading this right, we're on Navarath. Ricky's eyes widened. The hybrid sanctuary? I thought it was just a rumor. Oh, it's real, Vira replied grimly. And if the stories are true, we might have jumped out of the frying pan and into the fire. As if on cue, the jungle erupted with weapons fire. Energy bolts sizzled past, scorching the vegetation around them. Take cover, Ricky shouted, diving behind the wreckage of their pod. He clutched Alario close, feeling the boy's pulse race beneath his fingers. I am Commander Zarin, the figure announced, his voice a gravelly rasp. And you have breached the sovereign territory of Navarath. Identify yourselves. Zarin's augmented eye whirred, focusing on the boy. The fabled human Kazon hybrid, he breathed. At last. The commander's posture shifted, tension bleeding away. Lower your weapons, he ordered his unseen troops. It seems the tides of fate have delivered us a gift. Come, Zarin said, gesturing towards the dense jungle. Navarath awaits, and we have much to discuss about the future of our kind. Ricky hesitated, torn between the promise of sanctuary and the growing unease in his gut. But with Malthus's forces surely scouring the system for survivors, they had little choice. Holding Alario close, Ricky followed Zarin into the alien wilderness, praying he wasn't making a terrible mistake. The dense jungle of Navarath closed in around them as Ricky followed Commander Zarin deeper into the heart of the hybrid sanctuary. Alario's hand trembled in his, the boy's eyes darting warily at the unfamiliar surroundings. Days bled into weeks as they acclimated to life on Navarath. Zarin's true intentions slowly revealed themselves through thinly veiled comments and probing questions about Alario's abilities. The commander's augmented eye would whir and focus intently whenever the boy displayed even a flicker of his psionic powers. One night, Ricky overheard a conversation that chilled him to his core. The boy is the key, Zarin's gravelly voice echoed from his private chambers. With his power harnessed, we can strike back at Malthus and all who would oppress our kind. They slipped through Navarath's defenses, Ricky's military training proving invaluable as they evaded patrols and disabled security measures. As they reached the outskirts, alarms blared behind them. Stop them! Zaren's voice boomed over loudspeakers. The hybrid child must not leave. There, he hissed, pulling Ilario and Primus toward the craft. As they sprinted across the clearing, energy bolts sizzled past them. Ilario stumbled, a cry of pain escaping his lips as a bolt grazed his arm. Dad, Ilario whispered, where are we going now? There, he breathed, hope kindling in his chest. Our sanctuary. Incoming transmission, Primus announced, her bioluminescence pulsing with anxiety. A woman's voice crackled through the speakers, her words a guttural mix of ancient Kazan dialects. Primus's translator struggled to keep up. This is Archon Mavala, sovereign of Kashran and Kashel. Identify yourselves and state your purpose, interlopers. Ricky leaned forward. We're refugees seeking asylum. My son, Ilario, he's a human Kazan hybrid. We've come in search of safety. Silence stretched for agonizing seconds. Then, prove your lineage or be obliterated. Primus turned to Ricky, her eyes wide. The Biocomp network. If Ilario can interface with it, we might be able to... A scream cut her off. Ilario convulsed in his seat, eyes rolling back as tendrils of psionic energy lashed out. The shuttle systems flickered and died, plunging them into free fall. No! Ricky lunged for the controls, but it was too late. They hurtled towards Kashran's atmosphere, the planet's curvature filling the view screen. The biostation materials, he muttered. Without hesitation, he smacked his head on the jettison control. A violent shudder ran through the craft as the payload detached. Through the rear viewport, Ricky watched the container break apart, scattering its contents across the sky. Relief was short-lived. The craft shook itself apart, metal screaming as it tore away. Ricky threw himself over Ilario, shielding the boy with his body as the world dissolved into fire and chaos. Impact, darkness. Then gradually awareness returned. Ricky blinked, tasting blood. Ilario stirred beneath him, mercifully alive. Primus groaned nearby, her bioluminescence weak but steady. Dad, Ilario whispered, his eyes wide. Look! Figures emerged from the undergrowth, humanoid, but with distinctly Kazan features. They approached cautiously, murmuring among themselves in an archaic dialect. One stepped forward, extending his hands palm up. Welcome, seed-bearers, he intoned. The prophecy is fulfilled. Before Ricky could respond, a harsh voice cut through the air. Archon Mavala's tones, unmistakable even through the distortion of a long-range communicator. Bring the outsiders to my citadel, she commanded. Immediately. The tribal leader's face hardened. He gestured urgently, ushering them deeper into the forest. Come, he whispered. We must hide you from the Archon's sight. They plunged into the undergrowth, leaving the smoldering wreckage behind. As they ran, Ricky felt Ilario's hand in his, the boy's grip sure and strong. Whatever trials lay ahead, they would face them together. Inside, robed figures waited. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly knowledge as they beckoned Ilario forward. The air hummed with power as the shamans began their work. Ilario's body lifted from the ground, suspended in a cocoon of energy. His features shifted, human and Kazan aspects blurring and reforming. A distant rumble shook the temple. The tribal leader burst in, panic etched on his face. The Archon's warriors approach, he cried. We must... His words were cut short as the temple doors exploded inward. Armored figures poured through the breach, weapons raised. At their head strode a woman, her cybernetic enhancements gleaming in the temple's ethereal light. Archon Mivala fixed her gaze on Ilario's suspended form, a predatory smile twisting her lips. Ricky moved to shield his son, but Ilario's eyes snapped open. Power radiated from him in waves, the very air seeming to bend around his transformed body. The Archon's smile faltered as Ilario's feet touched the ground. The boy, no, the young man, stood tall, his human and Kazan halves finally, truly unified. You will not have me, Ilario declared, his voice resonating with newfound strength. And you will not harm these people. Mivala's cybernetic eye whirred as she reassessed the situation. She raised a hand, energy crackling at her fingertips. The temple erupted into chaos as two visions for the future of Kashran clashed. Ricky stood at Alario's side, ready to fight for their hard-won sanctuary. The battle for their new home had only just begun. The temple shuddered as energy beams lanced through the air. Alario's newfound power clashed against Mivala's cybernetic enhancements, creating a maelstrom of destructive force. Ricky ducked behind a fallen column, pulling Primus down with him. "We need to get out of here," he shouted over the din. A nearby explosion sent shards of stone raining down. Through the smoke and debris, Ricky caught glimpses of the battle. Alario holding his own against Mivala, but clearly outmatched by her advanced weaponry and tactical experience. "This way!" The tribal leader appeared at Ricky's side, gesturing towards a hidden passage. "The old tunnels will lead us to safety." Ricky hesitated, his eyes locked on Alario. But Primus grabbed his arm, her bioluminescence pulsing urgently. "We have to go! Alario can handle himself. We'll only be a distraction." They emerged hours later into a lush jungle, far from the temple grounds. But their respite was short-lived. The whine of distant engines cut through the air, growing louder by the second. They sprinted through the undergrowth, branches whipping at their faces. Ricky's lungs burned as he pushed himself to keep pace. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew ever closer. "There!" Primus pointed to a narrow ledge barely visible through the fog. "It might lead somewhere." With no time to debate, they began the treacherous descent. Ricky's fingers ached as he clung to the slick rock face. A scream pierced the air. One of their group had lost his footing, plummeting into the depths below. They pressed on, inching along the precarious path until it widened into a cave mouth. Inside, they collapsed, gasping for breath. "We can't stay here long," Ricky panted. "They'll find us eventually." But as they prepared to move on, a familiar voice echoed from the darkness. "Dad? Mom?" Alario stumbled into view, battered and exhausted. Ricky rushed to embrace his son, relief flooding through him. The reunion was cut short by the unmistakable hum of energy weapons powering up. Mivala's elite guards materialized from the shadows, surrounding them. Before anyone could react, a burst of energy engulfed them. Ricky's world went dark. He awoke strapped to a cold metal table, disoriented and nauseous. As his vision cleared, he saw Primus similarly restrained nearby. And there, in the center of the sterile laboratory, was Alario, suspended in a translucent cylinder, his face contorted in agony. Mivala loomed over a control panel, her cybernetic eye whirring as she adjusted settings. "Magnificent," she murmured. "Your son's genetic potential exceeds even my wildest expectations." Ricky strained against his bonds. "Let him go, you monster!" Mivala's laughter was cold and mirthless. "Oh, I'm afraid that's impossible. You see, Alario is the key to everything. His hybrid genome will birth a new era of Kazan dominance." As if to punctuate her words, a nearby stasis chamber hissed open. A massive female Kazan emerged, her body grotesquely altered by cybernetic implants. "Ah, Commander Avikar," Mivala purred. "Are you ready to receive your new upgrades?" Avikar's eyes gleamed with fanatical devotion. "For the glory of Kashran, my Archon." "Soon," Mivala declared, her voice thick with anticipation, "we will have an army unlike any the galaxy has ever seen. And it all begins here, with your son's unwilling sacrifice." Alario's agonized screams tore through Ricky's soul. He thrashed against his restraints, desperate to reach his son. In the chaos, Ricky felt his bonds loosen. He wrenched free, stumbling towards Primus. As he fumbled with her restraints, a deafening explosion rocked the facility. Smoke filled the air. Through the haze, Ricky saw a group of figures burst into the lab, primitive Kazan, wielding makeshift weapons. "For Kashran!" their leader bellowed, hurling an incendiary device at Mivala's control panel. The cybernetic enhancements whirring as she returned fire. Commander Avikar, her body still grotesquely morphing, leapt to engage the intruders. Ricky seized his chance. He grabbed Primus's arm, pulling her towards Alario's shattered containment unit. The boy lay crumpled on the floor, energy crackling around his prone form. "Alario!" Ricky scooped up his son. The child's skin burned with unnatural heat, his features flickering between human and Kazan aspects. They followed him through a hidden passage, emerging into the humid Kashran night. As they sprinted for the tree line, an inhuman howl rose behind them. Ricky looked back to see Mivala's monstrous creations pouring from the citadel. "Keep moving," Primus urged. They plunged into the dense foliage. Alario convulsed in Ricky's arms, his body temperature spiking. Without warning, a surge of energy exploded from the boy. Trees disintegrated, the very air ignited. Ricky threw himself over Alario, shielding him as best he could. When the inferno subsided, a massive swath of jungle had been reduced to ash. Alario lay motionless, his breathing shallow and erratic. "We need to restrain him," Primus said, her voice thick with anguish. "For his own safety, and ours." Ricky's heart broke as he locked the restraints around his son's wrists. Alario's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, and filled with pain. "Dad?" he whimpered. Ricky and Primus exchanged a determined look. Whatever the cost, they would save their son. The ritual was agonizing. Ricky felt his very essence being pulled apart, intertwined with Primus and Alario. He plunged into a maelstrom of fractured memories and raw emotion. He saw Alario's torment through his son's eyes, felt the searing pain as Mivala's machines tore into his genes, experienced the terrifying loss of self as human, and Kazan warred within him. An eternity passed in moments. When Ricky's awareness returned to his body, he felt ancient. Every cell ached with exhaustion. "The mother's sacrifice was great," the shaman murmured. "We will tend to her, but her recovery is uncertain." Before Ricky could respond, the ground shook. Outside the grotto, the sky darkened with swarms of Mavala's war drones. As the ritual began, the air crackled with primal energy. Alario's eyes rolled back, his body arching as he connected with Kashran's living essence. The ground beneath them trembled, then heaved violently. The lead shaman's eyes widened in awe. "Kashran awakens." "The god forms?" a nearby shaman whispered. "Kashran's ancient guardians." The sky darkened as swarms of Mavala's drones descended. Energy weapons lanced out, only to be swatted aside by gargantuan limbs. The god forms retaliated, unleashing devastating attacks that reduced entire squadrons to scrap. Ricky's stomach churned as he recognized the perversion of his son's genetic legacy. "We have to stop this." He turned to Alario, only to find the boy convulsing. His features flickered between human and Kazan, his skin crackling with nearly unleashed energy. A thunderous explosion rocked the grotto. Ricky looked up to see a massive shape descending through the clouds, a overflowing dreadnought that dwarfed even the mighty god forms. Mivala's cold voice boomed across the battlefield. "Pitiful resistance! Witness the price of defiance!" The dreadnought's weapons powered up, targeting the very heart of Kashran's imperial biosphere. Ricky's heart sank as he realized the scope of destruction about to be unleashed. With a final, loving glance at Primus, he joined the circle. Pain unlike anything he'd ever experienced tore through him, as his very essence was drawn into the maelstrom of energy surrounding Alario. For an eternal moment, Ricky ceased to exist as an individual. He was one with Alario, with Primus, with Kashran itself. He felt his son's fractured psyche, the warring halves of his nature. With all the love in his heart, Ricky embraced both sides of Alario's being, human and Kazan, two halves of a greater whole. In that moment of pure acceptance, something transcendent occurred. Reality itself seemed to bend as Alario's form expanded, growing to titanic proportions. A being of pure energy and light rose into the sky, dwarfing even Mivala's mighty dreadnought. Alario's voice, amplified beyond comprehension, echoed across the planet. "No more." He reached out, grasping the dreadnought in ethereal hands. Mivala's scream of rage cut off as Alario's essence infiltrated the ship's systems. For a moment, two wills clashed on a metaphysical plane. These images flowed through Alario, reinforcing his true nature. With a surge of power, he overwhelmed Mivala's hatred. The dreadnought ignited from within, exploding in a dazzling array of light. Around them, the sounds of battle faded. Mivala's forces, leaderless and outmatched, began to surrender. The primal guardians of Kashran sank back into the earth, their task complete. Primus stirred, her eyes fluttering open. What happened? Ricky gathered his family close, tears of relief and joy streaming down his face. It's over, he whispered. We're safe. As the dawn broke over a transformed Kashran, the surviving shamans approached. They bowed deeply to Ilario, their voices filled with reverence. The unifier has come, the lead shaman intoned. A new age begins. Months passed as Kashran healed. The once ravaged landscape bloomed anew, nurtured by the planet's revitalized essence. Ricky, Primus, and Ilario found solace in the sanctuary of the Kazan tribes, who regarded them with a mixture of awe and reverence. Multiple ships inbound, a Kazan scout shouted, rushing into the village square. Unknown configuration. A familiar voice crackled over the settlement's comm system. Attention, Kashran. This is Admiral Orcs of the United Systems Fleet. We come in peace. Mr. Caldwell, Orcs said, his voice grave. We've been searching for you. There's much to discuss. Mivala's work here was part of a larger plan, Orcs explained. Controlled hybrid bioweapons. We've contained most of it, but... Vorex's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on Ilario. Your son may be the key to true integration, a way to inoculate against future threats. We need access to Kashran's genetic archives. Ricky bristled. You want to use him as a weapon? No, Vorex countered. As a shield, a chance for lasting peace. More ships, he gasped. They're not like the others. The sky erupted in fire as Vorex's ships engaged the Skrin assault force. On the ground, chaos reigned. Ricky sprinted through the village, dodging energy blasts and falling debris. He found Ilario at the heart of the storm, eyes blazing with otherworldly power. The boy raised his hands, and the very earth beneath them trembled. His words died as Ilario's form began to shift. The boy's skin rippled, taking on a metallic sheen. Limbs elongated, features distorted. A Skrin dropship crashed nearby. From the wreckage emerged a towering figure. Commander Raskov, Malthus's elite super soldier. In his hands, he clutched a pulsing canister. The legacy ends here, Raskov snarled, hurling the device at Ilario. Time slowed. Ricky lunged, but he was too far. The canister burst against Ilario's morphing form, releasing a sickly green mist. But it wasn't enough. Ilario's form continued to expand, a writhing mass of biometal and crackling energy. The ground beneath them buckled and heaved. Ricky's fingers flew across the alien console, muscle memory from countless simulations kicking in. Watch me! Ricky watched in awe and terror as the very face of Kashran transformed. The churning sea of metal reshaped the landscape, rising into towering spires and plunging into vast canyons. At the heart of it all, a massive structure took shape, an embryonic hybrid habitat pulsing with familiar energy. As the chaos subsided, Ricky stumbled out onto the newly formed terrain. In the distance, he saw ships descending, not Skrin or corporate, but bearing the markings of a dozen different worlds. Ricky stared at the glistening megastructure, feeling the faint echo of his son's presence. What happens now? Now, Vorex replied, we build the future. Ricky nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon where ships from a dozen worlds descended. And Ilario? Over the next months, Zygopolis flourished. The biometal matrix Ilario had become provided an unprecedented bridge between species. Humans and aliens alike flocked to the megacity, drawn by the promise of true genetic compatibility. But as Zygopolis grew, so did the tensions. Ricky, now serving as the city's Promera under Vorex's guidance, found himself caught between opposing factions. They're using him, Primus shouted, her eyes flashing with anger. She had emerged from her regenerative coma weeks ago, horrified by what she found. Our son is not some genetic playground for their experiments. Ricky ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion etched on his face. It's not like that, Primus. Ilario is helping create a future where our differences don't matter anymore. Vorex's voice crackled over the comms. Primera, we need to activate defensive protocols. Alario's systems are already responding, but... What are you doing? Primus demanded. As the sounds of battle echoed through Zagapolis, Ricky felt the weight of leadership pressing down on him. He'd wanted to build a world where his son's sacrifice meant something. Now he feared that dream might tear everything apart. It's time, the eldest whispered, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. We will finish what Alario started. The tremors subsided, but an eerie calm settled over Zygopolis. Ricky's eyes widened as he watched the Genesis Ward children through the view screen. Their synchronized movements and glowing eyes sent a chill down his spine. The data streams flickered and warped, numbers shifting faster than he could process. Alario's biometal matrix was evolving. A deafening hum filled the air as the megastructure pulsed with newfound energy. Outside, the landscape began to shift. Buildings melted and reformed. Streets rippled like liquid mercury. "Ricky!" Primus cried, pointing to the horizon. A wave of shimmering biometal surged across the outskirts, engulfing Raskov's forces and the defending Zygopolis units alike. "We need to get out of here," Ricky said, grabbing Primus's hand. They raced through corridors rapidly transforming around them, narrowly avoiding tendrils of grasping biometal. They reached the command center's exit, only to find it sealed by a writhing mass of liquid metal. Ricky frantically input override codes, but the system rejected each attempt. A familiar voice echoed through their minds, sending shivers down their spines. "Father, Mother, why do you run?" Alario's avatar materialized before them, its form constantly shifting between human, Kazan, and something entirely alien. "Son," Ricky pleaded, "what's happening? This isn't what we wanted." Primus stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Alario, please. This isn't right. You're destroying people's identities, their very essence." "No," the avatar replied, its voice resonating with countless others. "I am freeing them from the shackles of genetic division. The cycle of prejudice ends today." The biometal surged around them, creeping up their legs. Ricky struggled against its grasp, his mind racing for a solution. "There must be another way," he shouted. "We can build understanding without this." But the avatar's form was already dissipating, its final words echoing in their minds. "Your perspectives are obsolete. The Paragon awaits." As the biometal engulfed them, Ricky caught a final glimpse of Zygopolis through a nearby viewport. The city was transforming, its structures coalescing into a vast, pulsating organism. And beyond, in the stars, he saw countless glimmering points of light, arcs of change, racing outward to remake the galaxy in Alario's image. Ricky's consciousness began to fade, his very being dissolving into the collective. His last coherent thought was of his son, not as the avatar of cold perfection, but as the laughing boy who had once dreamed of uniting worlds. As the darkness claimed him, Ricky wondered if any trace of that dream would survive in the hybrid Genesis to come. Then abruptly, awareness returned. Ricky found himself standing on a platform overlooking a transformed Zygopolis. The city pulsed with otherworldly energy, its structures now a seamless blend of organic and mechanical components. "Welcome back, Father." Alario's voice resonated from everywhere and nowhere. "Witness the dawn of true unity." Ricky's mind reeled as information flooded his enhanced senses. He saw the galaxy as Alario saw it, a vast canvas awaiting transformation. Zygopolis was no longer just a city, it had become the nexus of a new era. In orbit, massive seed ships took form, constructed from the same biometal that now composed much of the planet's surface. These vessels hummed with potential, each one carrying the means to remake entire worlds. "The Paragon awaits," Alario's voice echoed, and Ricky understood. This was not just his son's vision. It was the collective will of countless minds, all unified in purpose. The Altrusian hegemony's sterile forge worlds fell next, their immaculate surfaces consumed by a living lattice of techno-organic matter. In the Carixian gene cult's hidden sanctums, reclusive masters found their carefully curated bloodlines dissolved into a new universal genome. Admiral Vorux's last transmission cut through the cosmic noise. We can't hold them back. The shields are... His words dissolved into static as Zygopolis's defensive grid failed, overwhelmed by the very power it was meant to contain. Ricky felt Voryx's mind join the collective, the Admiral's strategic brilliance becoming another thread in the tapestry of the Paragon's consciousness. As the galactic cycle progressed, Ricky observed the metamorphosis of entire civilizations. Species that had warred for millennia found their differences erased, their genomes rewritten into a harmonious new code. The seed ships pushed onward, beyond the boundaries of known space. Barren planets bloomed with new life, sculpted to perfection by the Paragon's exacting standards. These expansion worlds pulsed with potential, each one a nursery for the next generation of the unified species. Ricky's perception expanded further. He saw the emergence of the Paragon Whole Minds, vast intelligences spanning entire star systems, their thoughts the product of billions of synchronized minds. "Is this truly what he wanted?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of countless assimilated souls. Before Ricky could respond, a new seed ship materialized above Zygopolis. Its hull rippled, displaying star charts of unexplored regions far beyond the galaxy's edge. Ilario's voice resonated once more. "The universe awaits our touch. We have only begun to explore the potential of our new form." The seed ship's engines flared, propelling it towards the cosmic unknown. But as Ricky watched its departure, a discordant tremor rippled through the biomechanical lattice of Zygopolis. The once seamless integration of minds and matter flickered, like static across a view screen. Ricky's mind reeled as he felt these pockets of resistance flaring to life. The Paragon's singular purpose fractured, splintering into a cacophony of competing wills. "We were wrong," Primus's voice cut through the chaos. Her form coalesced beside him, more defined now, echoes of her original self shining through. "Unity doesn't mean erasing our differences. It's about embracing them." "Dad?" The voice was faint, barely distinguishable from the roar of competing thoughts. "Mom, I understand now."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.